welcome back to another episode of the Property Perspective. Um, got my co-host here, as always, Shivaria, and you got myself,
Hello, hello.
Prakash. So we've done quite a few of these, and I know from feedback that we've had from clients and even prospective clients, that these have been really useful sessions for them to see on Facebook because we cover so many things about our process end to end and how we help our clients get buy-to-let investments. So today I'm really excited to go through a couple of points, and this is a bit more specific in terms of what we actually do from a property perspective, the actual tangible asset, as well as the type of tenant that we go for. So Shiv, to get us kicked off, I think what is a real common thing that people want to know is what type of property do we invest in for our clients? Because I've had
Yeah,
conversations, and I'm sure you've had the same, where we've spoken to so many people who are enticed by the new build, enticed by the price of flats and apartments to see if that they can get a better return there. What type of property do we focus on specifically, and why?
yeah. So this is a really good question, and of course, ever since the whole Grenfell thing happened, a lot of people already are aware that there are some downsides of flats. A lot of people, just in case people don't know, people who bought flats previously before Grenfell happened, then there were some changes to the rules, and basically it made some of those properties that had some of those cladding issues unmortgageable. So there's a lot of people that are coming off their current mortgages that used to just refinance onto another mortgage that found out, oh my God, I can't remortgage. I've got to stay on this current mortgage, and it's now gone into a standard variable rate. So the first things first is that we typically tend to invest in freehold properties or long leasehold properties. So what that means, and it's long leasehold properties, they're called virtual freehold. So these are properties that have a 999-year lease. Obviously, that's going to outlive any of us. And so from a perspective, like I said, they're called virtual freehold. What we're looking to avoid is short leasehold. So what we're saying is things that have, like, say, a 99-year lease or a 125-year lease. And the reason for that is because that's now, a lease means it's been rented to you. So you're not actually buying the property. What you're doing is you're buying the lease from that person to say, you can live in this house for this number of years. And then at the end of that lease, or when it gets down to say 30, 40, 50 years, you then have to renew the lease. You've got to basically pay, let's say, a chunk of money, 40, 50, 60,000 pounds, whatever it might be, to be able to renew that lease from 50 years back up to 125 years or whatever it might be. And you've got to constantly do that. So as a result of that, a lot of the flats that we see being built are on short leases. And if they are on short leases, then you're constantly going to have this renewal process, which means that the value of those flats is much, much lower. So the first things first is we're looking at freehold properties and long leasehold properties. The other important thing, which I have discussed on another webinar at some point, is to say that the freehold properties in the areas that we invest in Leeds and Sheffield, have been increasing at a rate of somewhere between 10 and 13% per annum from the year 2000 to the year 2022. That's when we did the exercise. So that's 22 years of 13% per annum increase in the price of those properties. The same, when we do the same exercise for leasehold properties in that same area, it's 3% per annum. So what we're saying is, do you want your property price to increase at 13% per annum, or do you want it to increase at 3% per annum? If you want 13, you need the freehold properties.
Okay, so I love that. And the difference there between a freehold versus a leasehold that's got a term of 90, 100, 125 years is clear. Is there any reason why we still go for the long leaseholds of that 999 years? And does that have any negative impact?
Detrimental. Yeah. Okay.
Let's go a little
Yeah.
bit deeper into
So
that.
yeah, definitely, really good question. So basically, of course, if we had a choice, we'd choose a freehold. But in some areas, so for example, large areas of Sheffield that we invest in, they don't have freehold properties. They just have long leasehold properties. Back whenever they were built, they were, mining towns or whatever, and they were built in a specific way as long leasehold properties. So they started off as 999 years. It's not been that many years. There's probably now 940 years left, but it's still going to outlive multiple generations of yours. And because they're called virtual freehold, it means that there's no actual detrimental impact. Now, don't get me wrong. When you're like 20 generations down the line, or 15 generations down the line, you've sold it and you've sold it and you've sold it over and over and over again, then maybe when those are getting down to 50-year leases at that point, then there might be an issue and we have to renew the lease. However, there is also leasehold reform coming into place, which means that actually by that point, we won't have to worry about any of this stuff and it should be fine. But for the time being, there is no real difference between the freehold properties that we buy and the long leasehold properties buy from a price perspective and from a growth perspective because they are effectively virtual freehold.
Okay. In terms of doing the types of houses that we go for versus new builds, let's talk about that for a second because there's, I'd say, a lot of opportunity coming into play with new build properties where people have the opportunity to get into them whilst they're being built. And then also,
Yeah,
obviously, once the development is done, we've got some opportunity there for brand spanking new houses. And people love things that are shiny and new, which is, I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
ingrained into our very being, right? So, why do we stick with properties that are traditional houses that have been built over the last 50 to 150 years? And why
Yeah.
are we not tackling the new build market?
Yeah, really good question. So the first thing is that obviously everyone knows, everyone's heard this story. If you buy the car, the moment you drive it off the showroom, it loses 20% or whatever it is. That's because it has a virgin premium on it. And the same is true for property. So when you buy new build properties, flats, houses, whatever, because you're the first person that's ever lived in them, they have a virgin premium on them. So whilst the developer's telling you, don't worry, you're getting an amazing discount, the discount that they're giving you is off the price that they have set. So let's imagine that the price of those particular two-bedroom flats in that area or two-bedroom houses in that area are £150,000. When they set the price, they'll set it at £175,000. And then when they say they'll give you a discount, they'll give you a 10 grand discount. So you're still buying it at 165, whereas actually you could probably buy that same house, an older house, for £150,000. So you're paying this virgin premium, and don't get fooled when they say you're going to get a discount because you're actually just getting a discount off the inflated price anyway. That's the first thing to note. The second thing is that if you are, and I've done another Facebook Live about this as well, if you're buying a property and you're being asked to invest in it before it's been built, before it's actually been built, then you're not investing in the asset, in the property. You're investing in the ability of the developer to develop out the property. Now, they could be an amazing developer, but the fact of the matter is we just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So what happened a lot of the time, during COVID 2019, is people never saw COVID coming. People never saw the global financial crisis coming. People are not going to see the next thing that's going to come. And at the time that that thing came, it was just a bad time and the price of property was lower. So let's say the developer wanted to sell the properties at £150,000 and now no one wants to buy the property, so they drop their prices or whatever. If they drop the prices too much, they're not making any margin. If they're not making any margin, then they might decide, well, you know what, we'd rather just liquidate and go bust because we don't want to lose money. And so they might, usually when these developers build these properties, they build them in a limited company. They could just close a limited company down and there's not a huge amount of detrimental impact to them. So they go bust. All the investors who thought they were investing in property have now lost their money. And that's exactly what happened to me. If you remember, we talked about this a few sessions
Yeah.
ago. So that's why I don't invest in those new build properties that are being built, because I've had the experience myself and I've lost a lot of money doing that. Likewise, with new build properties that have been built, they have that virgin premium on it themselves already. And everyone knows, you look at houses that are being built and flats that are built these days, they're built, hollow walls, they're built, you can hear, you just whisper and you can hear it in the next door. Whereas everyone knows the old houses, they're much sturdier, they've been there for some time. In the new houses, you get cracks in the houses and stuff because it's settlement. In the old houses, they've already had the cracks have been filled, everything's been done. And ultimately, if you know that house has been, there and standing for the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, then it's probably going to be standing for the next 10, 50, 100 years. Whereas when you build new build stuff these days, they're also using different methods to build them. So before we used to build the houses with bricks and mortar, that's what we call bricks and mortar. Then they started using blocks, so breeze blocks, and we continue to change. So now people are doing like prefabricated houses and stuff. So the construction methods are changing, and we don't know that these construction methods can stand the test of time. So we don't know that the houses that are being built right now are going to be here in 100 years, 150 years, whereas the ones that have been here for the last 100 years, they're probably going to stick around for the next 100 years as well. So there are some reasons why we would choose older houses. Now, let's be clear. We're not trying to choose like really old houses that have like issues with central heat, they don't have central heating in them and they don't have double glazing in them and things like that. We're choosing houses that are like in the middle, if you like, the Goldilocks zone. They have central heating, they have all of these kind of like energy efficiency measures, but they're not virgin premium new ones. They're slightly older than that. Does that make sense?
Yep, definitely. Okay, so one thing that we haven't touched on is, so we've done new builds and we understand why we're going for long leaseholds and freeholds versus short leasehold properties. Why don't we touch other flats? For example, old buildings that have been converted to flats, masonettes, things like that. Why do we stick with houses and not the properties like masonettes and flats that have been built at the same time as those houses?
Yeah, it would be the same answer as the previous one, which is that the growth in the houses is, 10, 13% per annum. The growth in these flats is going to be 3% per annum. So really, we're not looking to buy those kind of properties. What I will say as well, just to expand a bit more into the kind of properties that we buy, we're looking at buying 2 to 3 bedroom houses. Why 2 to 3 bedroom? Because they're the most popular houses. There's constantly transactions happening with those houses. If at any point you want to sell a house, it's going to probably be a 2 or 3 bedroom house. Most people these days just live in a 2 or 3 bedroom house. Most people don't live in a 1 bedroom house. It's economically not viable to really build 1 bedroom houses anymore. That's why people build 1 bedroom flats, but not 1 bedroom houses. Imagine the cost of building a 1 bedroom house is probably like £5 cheaper than building a 2 bedroom house. So you might as well build a 2 bedroom house because it's worth a lot more money. More people want a 2 bedroom house, and also you can rent 2 bedrooms rather than 1 bedroom. As well as that, we don't really tend to buy 4 or 5 bedroom or 6 bedroom houses because in the back in the old days, you used to have a big family that used to live together. These days, we have more divorces, we have more single parent families. We're living much smaller family units. I mean, how many people live in your house at the moment, Dipesh? Two?
Well, I mean, yeah, at the moment there's two and the third on the
Two.
way. So
Third on the way. But again, same, two in your house, two in my house, two in most people's houses. And if they have
yeah,
children, then it'll be 3, 4 of them. But we don't have a requirement these days for like 5, 6, 7 bedroom houses. The most popular ones are 2 and 3 bedroom, and those are the ones that also tend to work best for rentals in terms of the amount of rent you get for them versus the price that you pay for them. The best returns are on the 2 to 3 bedroom houses. As well as that, what we're also looking for is buying, we call them normal houses, like semi-detached properties. If we buy a terraced house, it's probably going to be an end of terrace. It might even be a mid-terrace, but it'll be a good quality mid-terrace which has a garden. We're not going to buy, and people may not even understand what I'm about to say, we don't buy street-lined terraced houses without gardens. So a lot of the properties up in the north as well, the old properties in these kind of like coal mining regions and stuff, they used to just be back-to-back terraces. So that means that there's a terrace, a terrace, a terrace, a terrace, and then on the back of the terrace, there's another terrace house that's attached to this house. So there's only a front entrance, there's no back entrance. But because of that, there's obviously no garden. In the front of this terrace, there might be a little tiny yard, but again, there's not a huge amount of space there. And there might even be street lines, so there's no yard. It's literally they come out of the door and they're onto the pavement. Those kind of things is what we're not looking for. We did used to buy them 10 years ago, and I bought a lot of those myself. But the whole point of working with a company like ours is we've made all the mistakes. You don't need to make those same mistakes again because we've done all those things. We've made all the errors, and now we've got a model that works really, really well.
I love
Of
it.
course, like I said, double glazed, centrally heated, and of course they have the right EPCs and all of that kind of stuff as well.
So, if all's gone to plan, you should have a list of examples of properties to
Yeah,
actually show here. If you can share your screen.
I will. I'm going to show you two different things. Two different things here. So first of all, this is just our brochure, by the way. If you want to download this, just DM us, we'll give you a copy of this. But basically, this is the kind of properties that we buy, and they are relatively inexpensive with good potential for both rental return and capital growth. All of these things that I've already said, between 120 to 180,000 pounds, and this is an example of the kind of property that we buy. So this is a terrace property, but this does have a garden. So it's a nice terrace property with a nice garden. And here are some pictures of the kitchen, the bathroom, the lounge. Here is an example of the kind of floor plan that you'll get. So you come in the front door, you have the stairs that go upstairs. So they'll come up here. You have upstairs the bathroom, the bedroom, maybe you have 2 or 3 bedrooms here. Downstairs you have a lounge, and then the back you have a kitchen diner. So that's the kind of typical kind of floor plan. What I'll also show you if people are interested is if you go to our website, this is our website, and you go over here to the numbers and then go to deals, you'll arrive at this page over here. And it's got a whole bunch of examples of deals that we've done, of properties that we bought. And more important than anything else is just having a look at the kind of properties that we're buying. These are usually semi-detached properties. Some of the older ones, like I said to you, will be terraced houses. And, being that they're older ones, they also are, at that time, they were much more inexpensive. These days, they're a bit more expensive. And what we realize as well is when you buy, for example, a £150,000 house and you get 10% capital growth on it, you're going to make £15,000 on the capital every year. If you buy a £60,000 house and you get 10% capital growth, you've only made £6,000. So I'm not saying we want to buy the most expensive property that we have because we need to balance it out with the rental return. But ultimately, when we're buying the 70-type properties that we now buy between 120 and 180,000 pounds, 2 to 3 bedroom, those kind of properties, those are the ones that get the best possible returns because the numbers work the best for those.
Love it. Okay, so final thing that I want to end on for today's session is we've spoken about the actual tangible asset. Now let's talk about the end user that helps pay the investors for the money that they put in to get a return. So the types of tenants that we go for here, what is it that we specifically focus on? Because I've had conversations and there's multiple strategies out there. There's people that will only want to get students on board. There's people that are doing work to only get kind of government housing appropriated for
Contracts.
certain
Yeah.
areas because they want to get those contracts in and they want to provide housing for those people as well. And then there's people that focus on professional tenants. What is it that lifestyle property people focuses on and why?
Yeah, so we focus and we house most of our properties with professional families. And there's two reasons, there's two good things here. Professionals, because they then have a professional job and have a good earning power, but families as well. Now, why is that? One, whenever you have a family, typically the family members are now more responsible because they have to keep a kid alive. So because you've got to keep a kid alive, you become more responsible and you're just a more responsible adult. So you're not going to, I mean, most people will remember who are watching this will remember their time at university. We were not responsible people.
No,
And as a, how many people like, let the bin pile up and then just had the overflowing and whatnot? How many people had like, mold and grout on your, on the grouting of your bathroom? That's
I
the world that
do
we used to live in.
I do remember friends' bathroom hadn't been cleaned in so long. There was actually black slime that was
Oh gosh.
going through the bathtub. It was an interesting experience.
And that's the point. Like as that illustrates my point perfectly. That's why we don't invest with students. That's why we don't tenant to students because most students just haven't learned how to be responsible. They're living in their first house. There's not just one of them. There's six of them or eight of them or whatever. So now the responsibility is shared between eight people who probably like, well, I did it last week, so I'm going to wait for this person to do it next week, and then no one does it for like 20 weeks or whatever it might be. So we don't invest in students for that reason. But when we look at families, they're much more responsible. That's the first thing. The second thing is usually the child that they have or children go to a local school. If they go to a local school, let's say between the ages of like reception or whatever it is up to year 6, and then the next school will be year 7 until year 13 or whatever it is. They're going to usually stay in their house for that period of time until they move schools. Like what families don't want to do often is kind of like, oh, we're going to move schools whilst you're in the school. And certainly what they're not going to do is move halfway through a school year. That's very unlikely. So usually people will say, we're going to go to this school. So we're going to have this property. We're going to have this house. We're going to stay in that for a good 5, 6 years. And then when that child moves to the secondary school or goes off or whatever, and our requirements change, then we're going to move house as well. So it means we get a longer tenancy. So that's another reason why we choose families. And the third reason as well is because when you have professionals that are families, you typically have like two partners, a mum and a dad, for example. If you have a mum and a dad, then you now have two people that are working. And so you have two earners. And what that means is they're much more financially secure and they have savings. So what that means is if something happens and they can't afford rent or the rent goes up or whatever, they can dip into their savings. And if something happens and one person loses their job or whatever, they still have the other person's role, job to provide the income. And what are the necessities in life? Shelter, food, like these are the necessities. So people are going to pay their rent, they are going to pay for their food, and then all the luxuries will come after that. So that's why we're looking to invest in professional families, typically in the areas that we invest in. And then you also mentioned other strategy. We talked about the HMO strategy. So again, that's a student strategy. And the reason why is because the responsibility is shared. And so no one takes the responsibility. We've all lived in student houses and they're just not nice places to be. You said government contracts as well. Government contracts are great, but the challenge with government contracts sometimes is, it depends on who you get into the property. So by the way, everything that anyone can do in property, I've probably done it myself, right? So I'm not talking to you because I'm just talking to you. I'm talking to you because I've done all these things myself. We had a government contract with a client, with a property that we had, and they say, oh yeah, don't worry, for 3 years or 5 years, whatever, we're going to pay you fixed rent, no hassle, no issues, nothing. It's all good. But they put in, I think there were ex-convicts or something. I can't remember. Who is the government housing? Ex-convicts, asylum seekers, vulnerable people, these kind of people. So as a result, your tenants are going to be have more wear and tear on the property. And it was a 3-bedroom house, and there was I think a mum and a dad, and then 6 kids living in this 3-bedroom house. We have no say over who the government puts into that property. So they house these people in the property, and then what was happening is that the tenants were just bad tenants, and they used to go around with keys scratching people's cars, throwing bricks into people's windows and stuff. All this kind of stuff happens because they're just bad tenants. And somehow the neighbors, one of the neighbors, got my details I started getting calls and WhatsApp messages, like threats, like
Wow.
you got to do something about this. But here's the problem: it's not my issue; it's the government's issue because I've got, or the council, I've got a contract with the council. In my contract with the council, I have no ability to do anything about these tenants. The council have to do it. So I can complain to the council, but here's what the council said to me when I complained to them. They said, "We're trying to find them alternate accommodation, but we have not managed to do it yet." So we had to wait, I think it was like 20 weeks, 20 weeks of getting, threats to say, if you don't, move these tenants out, they're causing all this damage or whatever, for these tenants to eventually be moved out. And it's because there was a shortage of housing. Well, guess what? We live in an environment of a shortage of housing. So if you do get into that kind of situation and the council doesn't really care that much, they're just not going to do anything about it. And you're going to have to suffer all of those issues. So there's different reasons why you would do these strategies. But ultimately, for our clients, what they're looking for is a long-term, sustainable, hands-free investment option that gives them passive rental income. And for that option, what we're looking for is we're looking for the kind of tenants that we're talking about. So professional families, because they're long-term, sustainable, hassle-free tenants.
There's also one thing that I will add to this, which is I had a conversation with this about council contracts recently with a friend of mine, and they've had a strategy based just off of council contracts. And the reason that they were doing that was because by assumption, you'd think it would probably be the most secure because it's a program
Council.
backed by the government and the council, right? So what they found out, unfortunately, was that the council that they were working with went bankrupt. So the council
Yeah.
couldn't afford to pay the rent that they had promised and guaranteed for, I
Yeah.
think it was like a 5 year contract. So I think that's another really good point to say here, and maybe to finish up on is there is never there is no strategy that is 100% guaranteed.
Risk-free. Yes,
Yeah, there
exactly.
nothing in life is risk free. So um, even if you think about, oh, I might trust the government to help me out here, well, if the council's gone bankrupt, what does that tell you about what's happening with the way things are going? So that's why
Exactly.
is another reason why I think we focus so much on professional tenants, because professional tenants are responsible for their own income. They have opportunities to get other jobs, they have opportunities to get promotions. So there's always ways for them to progress, whereas they're not, I'd say, tied by the hands of the government and the way that the government wants to do things. And as we know, the government likes to do things slowly. And
Yeah.
speaking of the government, something exciting for everyone listening is that in a couple of weeks, we're going to be hearing about the new budget and all the new changes that are being proposed by Labour that are going to be coming into effect either
It's the
immediately or at some
autumn
point.
budget that's happening on the 30th of October. That's the date that you
That
should put
is
into your diaries.
that is, and once that's done, we'll be doing another live to talk about all the things that were mentioned, especially in relation to property and investing, and dispelling some of the jargon that they put out into the economy for the UK citizens, and making that much clearer for investors to understand what they're stepping into when it comes to investing. So, Shiv, thank you very much. And
Perfect.
this is another episode of the Property Perspective.
Perfect. We'll see you guys soon. And like I said, if you want a copy of that brochure, then just DM us and we'll send you a copy of how you can get started in property yourself. Take care.
Perfect.